go. Hey, everyone.
Welcome.
Hello, people. Welcome to the Tech Audio Chat. I am Dan Reynolds, a tech audio person. That is my
Alle-
designation,
Allegedly.
allegedly, reportedly. Oh, yeah, I forgot I was going to update the lower thirds to be more persistent. They sort of pop up every once in a while. I'm joined tonight by, joined by, what? This sounds weird to me now. Here on tonight's chat,
You nailing
we've
it.
we got Eric Buchholz, who is also by designation tech audio enthusiast, and David Weaver from the future, also tech
Yeah,
audio person.
yeah, that's true. I'm,
There's
I'm
a running
reporting in
theme.
from tomorrow where we are still interested in technical audio.
That's good to know. That's job security right there.
That's
We've
true.
got
If I disappear, that's sort of the canary in the
that's
in the.
that's how we'll know. That's how we find out. We've got Charles in the chat. Likes the
What's
music.
up,
That is very
Charles?
complimentary, everyone. And D Data 3. Hello. Oh yeah. Your avatar looks familiar. Did I just interact with you on some social media platform? And William Lowe, thanking the deities.
Is that
Yeah.
a thankful for the future being bright for tech audio?
Yeah,
Or
maybe. Maybe that's the case.
Is it bright or
I
just
like
just persistent?
it's
Really?
just it just keeps going. Got Steven in the chat. Oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, D Data 3 released a game on Steam recently.
nice, congrats.
Yeah, congratulations.
Always an achievement.
Yeah. It's what's actually, this is something that I have often, this opinion that I have held for a while, is the notion that if you're interested in like technical audio, like game audio, technical audio, that you should treat yourself like a game developer, broadly speaking. Because a lot of the work that you end up doing could be abstracted as just game development, just generally speaking.
Hmm.
There are sort of domain specific entry points, but I feel like so much of the more technical aspects of my work tend to be just something that a technical artist could be doing, VFX artist,
Hmm.
that sort of thing. So
Yeah, I think that
I,
describes a lot of people that are in the tech design space in general, not specifically audio or art or animation or anything. It's
yeah,
just people who like to dabble and mix things together and come up with cool things.
yeah, there's definitely a funny intersection between different domains that you find yourself in different games, especially when you spool up and you see how people do the same task in different ways, and that tends to be the same sort of problem
yeah,
space of like, oh well, I want to know how far away something is or how many of a certain thing are around me, and that can be, like you said, abstracted to, well, how many dangerous animals are around me, or what's the time of day,
yeah.
and what do I need to be worried about, for sure.
Yeah, in fact, to that point specifically, where we sort of shared information, event data, maybe. The on Project Lyra, which is a sample project you can download. I wrote a system called the Context Effects System, and the problem I was working with was just the idea of event abstraction. In particular, like a common scenario would be like footsteps or Foley events on animations. But the maybe vanilla approach that you might see is like, oh, I'm going to add a sound notify on a specific, or some sort of sound event on a specific frame of an animation, as an onset to the sound playing back. But what you find in game and particularly what the Lyra was sort of the kind of game that Lyra was kind of templating, is what happens when you change the character skin. What happens if there's like an armor system, and you've got to swap out footwear, or even just a simple like what happens when you're standing on a different material. And so I knew I needed to create some sort of abstract event system that could be like, okay, there's an event that happens, and then based on various contextual information, metadata, then you could make a decision about what appropriate sound was to play.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I was sharing this dilemma with VFX. And VFX was also doing the same thing because they were doing like dust ups and footprints and stuff like that. They were handling that sort of thing. And so when I created, if you take a look at the context effects system, it actually allows you to spawn audio components and particle systems. And because the VFX artist I was working with, I forget who it is, but he's really rad. He didn't want a different component for each event, and it wasn't an optimization issue, which is totally valid, but it was more of an issue around the footsteps being persistent beyond the lifetime of the event or whatever, because you need like a trail basically. And so, and it's very faint. If you play Lyra, you can see there's little footsteps that are left behind as your player runs around the level. And one of those details, it's just like, it's a shooter game. You're like, and I'm like, not looking at the footsteps, but someone will look at the footsteps.
Yeah, and it's a good example for others to follow.
Yeah, exactly. And so I also created a event interface. So you could have a component that would, or you could implement an event interface and it would automatically receive, event data, and then you could do stuff with that. And so you'll actually see their implementation was through that interface, and my implementation was through like an easy peasy component. You just slap on a bunch of libraries.
It's such a good example of syncing and trying to solve a problem that someone else is also solving, and one of the things I feel like I see all the time is I might do some detailed, direction finding for whether a person can shoot at me or something. And, because I'm looking for a bullet Doppler or I need something important like that. And then it turns out that actually either someone else is doing it slightly differently and there's a bug between the two systems, or I'm redoing work that they're already doing, or they haven't started doing that work yet but might need to do that work. Like the last week I've been looking at the environmental query system, the EQS, and just finding that it actually has, I believe, so much value for audio and tech audio, because it's a system about the environment. It's getting information about tags and where things are and what's happening. And I found it really funny that if you sort of set it up with the sensors, I think it's called the sensors or perception system, where it can tell where like an NPC could use it to work out where you are and sort of run towards you and follow you and that kind of thing. And one of the things that I sort of had a bit of a chuckle is there's a component where if you stand behind them outside of their visual radius or their range, they can't see you. But they can use sound sensors. But the sound system in EQS isn't hooked up to the audio system in Unreal. Right. It's a system called sound, and you need to raise events that are like make noise, but the make noise events aren't related to the audio, which again, I understand why that is. But I felt like the first thing I wanted to do was, well, I want this to be a parameterized thing in MetaSound, so I could say that certain sounds are weightier. So if you're wearing like big heavy gauntlets, for example, you make more noise than if you're not. If you're running around in sandals. And I could do that at the equipment level, but then I'm sort of propagating information into someone else's system that maybe doesn't need that, and they might need, for instance, the foot trails to be specific because of the armor, and they don't want it to be related to how much noise you're making or something. So there's always these intersections where tech audio is doing work that someone else is doing a variant of the same work, for sure.
Yeah. Actually, it's also a great example of just like there's an audio, conceptually speaking, an audio gameplay system, but it's has nothing to do with actual audio. Like it's just an idea, right? Like it could arbitrarily like perception could be anything, right? It could be
Mm.
aura or something, you know. But the by its labeling is sound related, and yeah, that's actually also something I've noticed, for better or worse. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Is the label being assigned to audio because by label instead of by actually thinking about the thing. For example, audio often gets strapped with like narrative system design
Yeah.
because they think of dialogue as being an audio related feature, but narrative is a design and writing, you know, related feature, and dialogue is just something that happens at the end of
Mm.
those like conversation events. And yeah, that's unless you're doing something cool where it's like you can punch them to interrupt their speaking, and then you need some kind of audio system that like supports transitioning from like, you know, the line to like
I love that idea because every time you jump on a dialogue system, they're like, "Hey, so you've played God of War 1, right?" And you're like, "Yeah, I get it." Mimir will like stop and say like, "Oh yeah, I'll tell you about it next time." And I just love the idea of Sony Santa Monica's just like, "Yeah, we've got that, but also if you punch Mimir halfway through the line, he'll react perfectly." And you're just like, "Damn, this game is so good."
I remember actually, I don't remember where I found this. I don't remember I don't think I've seen the talk in a long time. I think it was a talk about GTA. I think it was GTA 5 having like a dialogue interrupt, like could support procedural interrupt of exposition. So you'd have like the characters walking down the street and one's providing exposition, and like having like a car drive by or someone bump into the person and they like interrupt and go, "Hey, watch where you're walking," or whatever, and then resume the like they have like an ease back into the where they were
Nice.
in the exposition. That stuff I think is really interesting. Just the
I'm right
details.
in the middle of starting to build something like this for a game idea I'm working on, and even though I've worked on dialogue systems a fair few times in the past, there's it's still a very tall task every time you
Yeah.
do it, just for scope, just to work out like how much do I want to support? Do I want to support the being able to interrupt or tell stories along the way or whatever it might be? And there's a million GDC talks about
Yep.
how everybody has solved the problem, and then you sort of watch them and halfway through they're like, okay, so it doesn't do this or this or this or this or this, and you're like, that's fine, that's totally reasonable, because I realize that if I make an interrupt line, then I need to have interrupt lines for every type of line that they
Right.
have at every distance that they have, and all of a sudden my VO budget went from nothing to $1 bajillion.
Yep. 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 I'll tell you this interesting. This is an interesting story. Maybe I'll get in trouble for telling this
I'll
story.
be the arbiter of that.
Okay, good. Um, so the original in the original planning between well, okay, so the Matrix Awakens, when we started spinning up production on that, there was an audio director working that I'd been working with on other special project stuff, and like the UE5 announcement project. So and he's an awesome audio director, really uh, very visceral sound designer, you know. And when this started spinning up the production on that, there was a suggestion of doing ambient dialogue system because they're going to be like like NPCs everywhere, you know. And I actually started coding an ambient dialogue system inspired by the Valve talk, the classic Valve talk. Maybe I'll add a link to it after the chat or something like that in the video description. But yeah, it's like a classic talk about doing ambient audio with like a database query or whatever. And so I actually started coding that, and we were joking around about this whole like we were plotting, scheming to have the NPCs slowly realize that they were in a simulation. Like that's what we wanted, you know. So they'd just be like, "Hey, I'm walking here" or whatever, like selling hot. There was like high ambition to use smart objects for all sorts of stuff, like a hot dog stand and benches that people sit at and all this sort of stuff. And so they were going to have them interacting with each other, and that's like a complicated thing. You have to sort of like, okay, have some sort of weird interface where they know, like each character procedurally knows that they're talking to each other, you know, all that sort of stuff. And so I started getting into that, which was very interesting. And I had some really silly demos, but when then I got pulled over onto the Valley of the Ancient, the early access project. And when I got back to the Matrix Awakens, there was so little time left to do something like that. There was like, and the project specs had changed. You know how it goes. And so I remember really close to the end, one of the sort of creative director folks, the people who are sort of like providing high level direction, they sort of commented on that. They were like, why don't we have them like talk to each other? And I was like, do you want to write the lines? If you want to write the lines, we'll record it. It was like you could see the sort of calculus of like, okay, maybe not. But what I loved seeing what later on was that people had implemented like an AI interface and like prompted them to realize that they were in a simulation very slowly, which was great. I just love that people were on the same page as that. So
yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, it's such it's something can go so big so fast.
yeah,
And you really, I think the problem with a lot of dialogue is like diminishing returns. You know, how much more do you get out of it if the guy can grab the hot dog stand? That's great, but then every type of NPC, do they all have to have a hot dog stand thing, a bit? They've all got a bit about the hot dog stand, and you have to write a bit about every smart object ever. And then it's like combinatorially, like, wait, hang on, does every NPC need to have a bit about every other NPC? And in the new game I'm working on, yes, they do.
Oh, well, so here's I don't know if Eric has an opinion on this, but I have definitely an opinion on this. And I'll say this, and this I think is maybe just something personal to me, because I really like role playing games. I like the fantasy element, and I like a lot of the role playing mechanics. But I have like focus issues when it comes to lore text. You know, where you're like, I found a book, and it's 5 pages of someone's very heartfelt written, like, you know, OC lore, and I'm like glossing through it, like I'm like skimming it. So is there keywords, you know? And I kind of just, you know, move on. Whereas I had a really wonderful experience related to that when I played uh, uh, Star Wars Old Republic, the MMO, because they had lines for everything. And so you'd pick up a data tape and it would have all that lore text, and you just keep playing the game while it's going on in the background. And everything was voiced. And obviously there was a lot, you know, that tap a lot of talent for that, and some performances were more successful than other performances, but I really enjoyed that, and I hoped so badly that it would do amazingly because of that. You know, I think it still holds like really high record for like total number of dialogue lines, but it did not do, I think, that as successful as they hoped.
I think that strategy has definitely stuck around in a lot of ways to various levels. I think the trickiest thing is like the gameplay. I remember playing Diablo. I was a big Diablo fan. Diablo 3 comes out, or Diablo 4 comes out, and they have these journals you read, and you read the journals, and they're lovingly written, perfectly universed, lore dependent bits about these really interesting things that I cannot hear buried in the blood screams of everybody I'm killing. And it's, I'm picking up this book and I'm just like, I've got this guy going, well, Belial was the and I'm just hacking everything to bits around it. And, I can't exactly I can't stop killing everybody, not out of bloodlust, but out of just pure survival requirements. And so it becomes really interesting because what do you sort of do? And then you have the opposite problem where you have something like Expedition 33, where there's some really, really fantastic lore behind each of the expeditions that you pick up, but it opens into a screen and sort of stops and says, oh, I could read it out for you, but you got to stay on this screen while I read it to you. Yeah. You're like, that's sort of the opposite. I think Horizon Zero Dawn did a pretty good job of kind of reading data tapes and having them follow you around. And I know God of War Ragnarok was just like, don't worry. You don't need gameplay. I'll just talk to you. It's all good. It's an audio book masquerading as a game. Great audio book, but it is one of those things where I think building lore, if you could work out ways to build lore, like one of the concepts we have in this little game demo I'm working on at the moment is trying to do things like when you walk past certain stores, have people comment about what they think about the certain stores, and not make it very dependent on a plot point, but just trying to world build by having do they like or not like that place or something. And I feel like if you could work out ways to do it with enough coverage, because if a person doesn't walk past that store, how do they learn about it? And that kind of problem as well.
Well, and that's sort of a cost valuation issue, right? Like I remember a talk Austin Wintry was given about the Journey soundtrack, and talking about how he kind of had to fight for music stems that were rarely heard. Because you're going through this whole process of recording an instrument, or a small section or something like that. And there's some probability that you take this route instead of this route, or you go near this thing and go around this other thing. You won't hear like that flute run or whatever, whatever it is. And the sort of pushback that he received just financially, it's like, why are we spending money on this thing that's someone could play the whole game and never experience it? It's a good question, but I like that, and I feel like there's the more we can do something like that, there is a richness to going back to the experience.
I found that but Baldur's Gate is a great example of being able to play through a game, get through Baldur's Gate 3, and probably you've seen 10 to 20% of even the locations on a first playthrough. And I don't think anybody would say that that's wasted money playing through it. And unless you took a very specific route that was particularly unsatisfying, you're probably going to have a great time. And it's like with all role-playing games, a DM writes a lot more material than they get to show, and we
throw it all out every session.
As long as the players said that they had a good time, then you've got something that you're totally not going to reskin and bring back later. And but it is. I can see from a financial standpoint, it's pretty tricky to say, well, hang on. I mean, how much is this interaction costing us? And when you get into like needing to pay for 100-person teams, that does matter if it's got to go through 20 people just to have a very detailed stapler.
Yeah, I do like it when games are more or less fully voiced to, as much as reasonable. Like Clair Obscur, of course, having all those logs, like I appreciate that. At the same time, like when I'm reading the log, like my eyes move faster than the recording, and so I usually finish it, and then I don't want to stick around and wait to hear the act. Like maybe I'll listen to the actor if it's particularly interesting, but Usually, I just want to get back to the action. Another game that I think kind of the same thing, which I would have. I liked it more that it had voice acting, but I would still kind of skip through it. Was Hades? Like, if you
Mm.
imagine, like they have like the subtitles, and it's like, okay, yeah, I can like kind of skim through and read it. Great voice acting and all that, but as a player, I just gotta go.
Yeah. One of the games I felt was really successful in terms of the flavor dialogue, or lore expansion, or whatever you want to call it, was the Tomb Raider reboots, the like Tomb Raider, Rise of Tomb Raider, Shadows of Tomb Raider, because there would be these moments where you would encounter some sort of artifact, and you'd go into this secondary screen where you're like examining the artifact, and the artifact itself is part of a puzzle, and so you're getting lore information as like Lara is talking to herself or thinking to herself about the artifact, and then you're trying to rotate it to activate the like examination of the part that's like relevant to this puzzle. And so there is a kind of like you're in the screen, and but you're also interacting with the screen. It's not just like some text in front of you or whatever, and it's also part of like trying to focus on the thing that you think is related to the puzzle that you're trying to solve.
That's really tricky. I think you bring up a really good point there, Eric. Of subtitle timing is a really big thing
Mm.
for me. If the subtitle happens before the line, specifically for some lines, not for everything, but if it happens, something's in the middle of happening, and then I kind of get the guy going, "No, I will never," or something before he
Yeah.
says, "No, I will never," and it always sucks to have subtitles kind of take away the power of the delivery, because then
Yes.
the delivery happens
Yeah.
and the subtitles already been there. And I know subtitles are really tricky because it's either hand marked up for markers to punch through things, or it's just done based on we just push the whole line out at the same time or something like that. But it does feel like a thing that I would probably want to add for subtitles is some kind of push pull
Yeah.
number that I could assign just to say, hey, play this one a bit later, because it sucks every time.
Yeah.
Like, to the point where I will usually try and play games with subtitles off for as much as
Yeah.
possible, just so they don't get that thing of wrecking a nice moment by just needing to have the
Yep.
subtitle.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, line delivery, and especially in humor, because I feel when you're crafting a good joke line or whatever, oftentimes you're trying to time the invoking word or
Yeah.
portion at the end of the of
Mm.
the of the but if it just comes up and they're like they start out the joke in the line, and then the subtitle pops up and you're like, I see the punchline, it totally softens the impact of the delivery, right?
Where it gets really tough is localization and trying to,
Yeah.
you know, it's again the exponential, well, not exponential, but like multiplicative number of implementation you have to update.
And it's funny. I played Clair Obscur in the French with English subtitles, and just absolutely adored the experience. I thought it was really really nice because I got all these Frenchism sort of deliveries that I could watch them deliver a line that felt very comfortable to them, and then read it. And the subtitles mostly I felt like were really really pretty good, and didn't take it away too much. But yeah, that comedic timing. I mean, if a sitcom had awkward pauses between parts of lines, or then jumped in over the top of each other, like, we would all not watch it.
Yeah.
So that's all that we're trying to do. Granted, it's a concert between subtitle text and audio lines, especially because people can skip through parts of lines and things like that, as well. But
Yep.
it's a tricky line to walk for sure.
And calls back to our original idea, a premise about who should own the system. Because if the narrative designers and the writers are owning the subtitles, then they have control over that. They can manage
Yeah.
that. But if they don't, who knows what's going to happen? Cool. Well, we missed our segue into what I was going to deal with because you talked about metadata and the environment query system. And my whole demo tonight is about procedural environment
That's a pretty clean segue
metadata.
from dialogue, I think. That's basically
Sure,
as
we'll do it.
good as it's going to get, really.
Clean. It's just a star wipe.
Yeah.
Just roll with it.
Yeah. So as promised, So this is something. Hold on a second. Now I got to share my screen. I've forgotten how I do this. Okay, there we go. We do that and we press that button. Cool. So part of this was part of the impetus here was that I wanted to demo something that was not code because we've been doing a lot of code related stuff over the last few weeks, and so I wanted to do something that wasn't code dependent. Sorry, just let's
Codependent.
slip there. and this was also something that I've always wanted to do. I've so for people who don't know, this ambient sound system, maybe we can talk about it a little bit. The ambient sound system called Soundscape, I wrote while I was working on special projects. The latest sort of greatest version of it is actually from the Matrix Awakens project. And but I was given permission basically to release it publicly, but I don't get any time to work on it, and I have I have so many, I have a big huge list of like 36 things that I want to fix or change about it, or update or implement features, and so much so that I even think sometimes I think about all of that stuff as like a completely different version, like a 2.0 version. But one of those things I've always wanted to do was integration with PCG. I feel it's a system that procedurally propagates ambient sounds around the listener, and it has features that allow spatial metadata, basically, that allow conditions for sounds to spawn based on whether or not there's relevant metadata in that region of space. So I felt like PCG is like the perfect let's get those together kind of thing, and because PCG is all about procedural content generation, and that's what it's named. Very clever name, and so I was like, I feel like there's something there, but I have only done before this, and still really I've only done like your first hour in PCG, where it's like how to spawn trees and grass, and rocks and little flowers. Just that, pretty much that's it. That's my whole experience so far. That's a deep tool. It can do so much cool stuff. But I was like, okay, well, even in this simple example, and they have now shipped actual turnkey samples, so I'm using one of those. But I was like, I think that this could be done. And what was cool is that a few months ago, a colleague at Epic, Clara Smith, thought the same thing, and she was working on a demo for Unreal Fest, and spun up a conversation with the procedural team or whatever on how to do this, and then I got pulled into that. So I was able to use that as a sort of framework, a starting off point. She didn't end up implementing it. She ran out of time or whatever. You know how it goes. But the conversation was started, and so I was like, I think that could be a good, neat thing to show. And also, I think there's some value in like the suddenly there's ambience, like that's just sort of, yeah. So so here I have a blank open world level, and let me see if we get sound here. Do you hear?
Yep.
Calming wind sound. I know my frame rate's gonna just tank right now. Sorry. I'm running on a 2080, so it's that's how that's. I think that's the reason. I think the reason is my graphics card. That's the blame we're laying here. But yes, my frame rate's going to just be horrendous right now. But the sound wise, you can hear that ambient wind sound, right?
Yep.
Good. Okay. All right. So let me make Unreal out of focus there. It's some sort of weird thing with focus and Chrome or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So right now I've got a Soundscape palette loaded. Soundscape. Should I explain Soundscape?
I
There are
think
videos on my website
just
about
before
Soundscape.
we start, it's probably worth mentioning that a lot of people think the output of PCG is geometry and pretty rocks and trees and stuff, but the output of PCG is information and data, and then we can do something
Yeah.
with that. So one of the things that Dan's looking to do here is utilize that output generated
Yeah.
from PCG's queries and the information about the world to make sounds or provide sound positions or position information. And you could do this with lots and lots of different types of objects. It doesn't have to just be rocks and trees and rivers and lakes and cliffs. So when we look into PCG systems in terms of the my first hour in PCG, you will always see the forest, the insta forest or
Yeah.
insta town or that kind of thing. But really, it is a very abstract way to look at your world. Just
Yeah.
thought I'd mention that.
Yeah. That's a really great context. And so yeah. The way that Soundscape thinks about space is it allows you to ensure certain sounds only spawn in areas of space with certain metadata that has been cached, representing that part of space. And that's, I call it the color point system. That's not really important. But yeah, so we can look at how those conditions work a little bit later on. But that's correct. What I am effectively looking to do is take the information about where trees and grass are spawning, and to take those locations and then feed that and translate that into this spatial metadata for my ambient sound system. Cool. So let me just show it working. Boop, boop, boop. So that's PCG. That's just a PCG graph. I just drop it in the level, and it's makes a PCG volume. And I put it like right on the start location, so it should work right away. But let's make it a little bit bigger, just for fun there. And there we go. And you can see I've got the 3D. And so all of the new sounds that are spawning in are all considered 3D by some measure. And there's some tricks that I do, which we can look at, to soften the effect of its sort of spatialization. But what I find really interesting are the edge cases, literally, where when you're on the edge, you can, I don't know if stereo is coming through, sorry if it's not, but where you're on the edge, you can hear the sounds coming from the environment and not from where the environment's not, right? And that's part of the philosophy of Soundscape. It wants, let me sort of eject here, F8 to eject. I should change my editor settings so that you can hear audio while I'm out of focus. Anyway, uh, um, the way that Soundscape operates, which is not always the best method for your project, I want to sort of put that out there. I like Soundscape's approach. It's very much how I think about ambient design. But the way that it sort of approaches ambient design is by allowing you to fill out a space with lots of small sounds. And to make larger sounds, they make more sense as distant 3D sounds rather than ambient beds. And so usually, as you'll see in this example, I usually like to have like a single ambient bed that's very gentle that represents my noise floor. And then I'll be spawning sounds around that, um, and uh, and everything else will be 3D. And what I like about that is the depth that you get as you traverse through space. All of those sounds pass by you, and it provides what I think of as an extra dimension to the soundscape. Whereas if you go with a bed, generally speaking, if you translate through the environment, you won't hear sounds pass by you. You can get beds that will rotate, that'll world lock, which is very helpful. That's a great next step if you just have like a 2D bed, or a non-spatialized bed. But I feel like they're like that only serves so much, and there is a sort of matte painting feeling to the sound, that that the sort of 3D sounds help make you feel like you're moving through an environment. That's how I feel personally. But it's not right for every project. It requires a fair amount of like budgeting, voices for your ambient environment, which is usually a low priority part of the experience. So that is something to consider. Let me quickly. I'm going to change my editor preferences here. No, if you go to the editor preferences and you type audio, you'll see an option here: allow background audio. If you're working in audio, check that on. And then the other thing you want to do is make sure this is false. Use less CPU when in background, and that'll keep your frame rate high while you're out of focus. So now we can still hear it. I'm no longer in Chrome is in focus for me now. Okay, so and then the again the sounds. So here's another thing that's a quirk about Soundscape, which may not be right for your project, and that is right now, even though you're just hearing the ambient noise floor, the sort of air that I have, Soundscape is trying to spawn other sounds. In other words, it's checking the locations around the listener. There are optimizations that you can use to manage when it's trying to do that, so you can make sure that it only tries to do that when you're in the presence of relevant space. But that is something that might be a gotcha as like when you're optimizing your project or whatever. So otherwise, yeah, it's super easy peasy lemon squeezy to just add environment audio, which I think is the neat part. That's the magic trick. And yeah, any questions before we take a look at things?
Can you just drag multiplayer into the level as well? Like, is that an option?
What do you mean drag multiplayer?
Like, just add a multiplayer button to it. Like just.
Oh,
sorry, it's a joke.
Yeah, it's not that kind of lemons.
Should be easy
in the lemon squeezy. It's not that kind of lemons.
I mean, it looks really easy to create those environments though, like that, and I'm sure you can get very detailed in kind of the parameters. Yes. Like everything can be a parameter.
PCG, yeah, and also another thing is PCG is a new graph.
Yeah.
And so the composition, the approach, the flow is a little bit different than than blueprints, than meta sounds, the materials. It's a new thing, and it's deep. It's a deep tool, and so it's very powerful because of that. But I will say that my understanding of it is pretty shallow, and we'll look at some things where I'm not sure if there's yet a solution for this problem, but I haven't found it. Let's put it that way. And then also, I would say that if I were to do like a first class integration, I wouldn't do it this way. I would make like I would do go into code and I'd make like some custom PCG nodes that did the thing that I wanted to do. But use we can already do a lot, and with very little, you'll see it's very little effort to achieve this.
Yeah, you can
Okay.
also make
Oh,
PCG nodes in Blueprint. It's not something you need to necessarily do
yeah.
code for. You can do custom PCG nodes there. The best introduction to PCG, besides actually following the My First Hour and some YouTube tutorials or whatnot, is the Electric Dreams demo. Is not for the audio side of the
Yeah.
PCG, but
That's a good
there
live stream too, you know.
there's no, they're great. I'm just saying the PCG side of the PCG side. It sounds great, but there's a PCG. There's a few elements in that Electric Dreams demo, even though it is very big to download. It's something like 70 or 80 gig.
Oh yeah, you need the actual
There
sample project.
is
Yeah.
yeah, there's sort of the sample project where there's the environment that is made, and then there's also some spline environments and things like that as well. So there's integration with PCG with splines and landscapes and actors and all sorts of things is one object. I'd say recommend looking at that, and then the other is the Cassini sample, which is a 5.5 or 5.6 maybe, which is the big push seems to be on the compute graph and moving PCG for GPU stuff and having instance static meshes and things. So it's I think it's going to become a bigger problem for audio, particularly
Yeah.
because we're so used to just a world being there and us just putting stuff in the world, but the world may not be there, and it may be different each time. There's definitely some things evolving in gameplay with hierarchical runtime PCG and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, and in fact, I actually, I worked on the Electric Dreams demo, but I didn't. It was a sort of a part time thing. I was part time consulting with the Swedish Tech team and the Sweet Justice folks, advising them. So like they use Soundscape, but they implemented themselves, that kind of thing. And I ended up focusing on some other technical issues, but I wanted to dig into it, and I just didn't have the bandwidth to like learn how. And I think actually, if I just found the time to sit down with someone on the procedural team, then and like have a one-on-one meeting or something, I probably would have gotten to do this. Like this is not what I did is what, and you'll see it's not that hard actually. And so yeah, I that was one of those things that I wish I had a little more time on. But yeah, so all right, so there's actually not very much going on here. I have this BP element, which is PCG blueprint, kind of what you were talking about, David. And I have this actor, this custom blueprint actor, and I have this struct. And so the basically, I knew I needed to um, in Soundscape I provide the color point data in a collection of arrays and a gameplay tag. So the gameplay tag represents the type of sound classification or category that is allowed to spawn in that space, and the vector locations are the actual points provided for those parts of space. And then what happens is when you give that collection to Soundscape, it compresses it into a spatial hash, where the area your spatial grid is then represented by a integer key, and the point value in that part of space is how many vectors occurred in that chunk of space. So if you say grab a cube of space randomly and there were 3 vector points in that part of space, you'd get a point value of 3. And so you just get this really sparse array, potentially large, where you just have a integer and a value that you get returned, and it's a very simple map. And so yeah, so that and that's actually another point of optimization, because ideally I would have created the hash during the graph generation. We'll look at that when we see the graph. We'll see there's an option to generate it, and so that compression happens potentially not during the gameplay time, during editor time or whatever. So until then, I knew I needed a gameplay tag to represent the color point classification, and I knew that I needed an array of vectors to represent the locations of that particular metadata. And I knew I needed, because I've done this sort of thing before, working with color point system. I wanted an offset. In other words, when you're talking about spawning, because I haven't checked this in, but I've done on my own sort of experiments using the foliage brush and automatically generating color points based off of the ISMs, the instant static meshes that the foliage brush generates. And the problem that you'll notice, like a tree is a great example of this. The root location of a tree's mesh is usually at the bottom of the tree. But if you are like, you want metadata about a tree because that you want to spawn a bird sound, you don't want that to be at the base of the tree. You want that to maybe be up in the air. So I have an offset option where you can sort of just offset all of the data points. And so that's the data structure that I've built for this this thing. Actually, sorry, I should make this bigger here. There we go. All right, there we go. People are probably happier with that. So I
Yeah,
got a
there we
little
go.
data structure. Sorry, folks. So yeah, so I got this little data structure. This is the gameplay tag, which I call a color point, and then the locations, and then the offset. Simple, simple. And then I have this actor. And this is the actor that I want to spawn in the for each of the PCG volumes. So all the PCG volumes, the graph, the volume sort of represents an instance of the graph, and the for each of these, I'm going to have an actor, and the actor is effectively managed by the graph. We'll see how that works. There's some quirkiness about having the graph spawn actors in this particular way, but it works, and it didn't require code. So this is the actor that will actually feed the metadata to Soundscape, and it will activate my sort of Soundscape as a sort of convenience to myself. Oh no, wait, sorry. Actually, I did end up doing that on the level, so we'll take a look at that later. Okay, there's also a level blueprint that I use here. So anyway, so this one's just adding data. There's a bug that I've noticed recently where sometimes if I try to interact with Soundscape on the first frame, I don't succeed. I have to look into that. something to investigate. But so I've got a stupid delay up front. But yeah, so then I just go loop through the an array of the struct that I showed you before, and I what am I doing here? Actually, I loop through the thing. Oh yeah, and then I have a color point collection that I'm building here, which is the actual struct that Soundscape receives, and then I feed that into the Soundscape subsystem via the add color point collection. And I provided the object path string of this actor, so every instance will have a unique name, and that becomes the collection's name. So when this actor is unloaded, it will also unload the collection, and that's actually really important because if you're working, say, like on an open world map, you have world partition loading in actors and unloading actors, and so you only want the PCG actors that have been loaded in to carry this information, and then the rest of them will sort of unload as you sort of recede from those areas. And so we'll see this actor basically spawns right on top of the volume route. So they presumably would get loaded in at the same time. There might be some nuances to that if, say, the volume has some other load settings or overridden on there, whatever. But yeah, that's the idea here.
So maybe I missed the initial introduction, but what's the reason behind spawning the actor? What's the actor there to do?
The actor there is actually to do this. That's it.
Which
This is all it
is
does.
what like
Which is
what's
it
the
just
output of what we're looking
it's
for here?
this actor, all its only function is to manage the lifetime of the color point data.
Gotcha.
So it stores it stores the data, serializes the data, and then when it activates, it loads it into the subsystem, and when it deactivates, it unloads it. And actually, if you look at the Matrix Awake, I'm sorry, what's it called? The city sample. If you look at the city sample, you'll see this. I actually have it's managed by a code system called the World Data something. So I forget the audio world data something subsystem or whatever module.
Mm,
And I have these world audio data actors, and their whole job is to manage the lifetime of spatial metadata.
gotcha.
And it part of it. So here's part of it. Part of it is that I did not know and still don't know how to write like a streaming manager from like a custom pack file. Like that's kind of a deep thing, and I don't really know how to do that. And world partition's already an automatic streaming system. It loads in actors based on their spatial location, and it unloads them based on spatial location. And so I can use the actor as effectively a streaming chunk of data.
So I guess the the question I've got when I'm thinking about what you've got so far is the data that you're generating is that pulled from PCG somewhere, or is this a sort
Yeah,
of
we'll take a look at that. Yeah.
okay,
Well, we haven't gotten to the PCG part yet.
cool.
I'm only going in order of object leafiness. In other words, I'm sort of going backwards, but we'll walk it back through. So
Cool.
we'll retread it. But yeah, the yeah. So the question is this about performance, and it is sort of like basically sounds. So my philosophy around Soundscape is that you're only hearing sounds that's relevant to the listener. In other words, it's only the sounds around the listener, and so I'm only spawning sounds around the listener. And so contextually speaking, it's really more relevant about the like local context is where the metadata needs to live. And so as you traverse through a very large world, you're going to load and unload parts of the world seamlessly to the player. And as you get to those other areas, you know, you'll start to experience that new metadata, which may be different in other parts. And so that's part of it is I'm just managing the actual data, and that is a memory performance issue. If I load the whole, like the Matrix city or whatever, the city sample was like 16 square kilometers or something. It's a lot of information, and I ended up slicing it by like 60 by 60 for each of my little world data actors. So I just take a small slice of the city, and then that actor is responsible for the data in that part of the city. And I also ended up putting it on my own data layer, so that that could be independently managed if we wanted to for whatever reason. But yeah, so that's the idea of this actor is just managing the lifetime of the data as it sits in memory, and otherwise, it's streamed in and out with world partition.
I guess the PCG node, it's like the PCG graph itself or PCG actor, that would be streamed out at the same time. Is that the idea?
Huh? Yeah. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess we could just jump to the graph. This is a demo graph. This is a graph that is part of the demos, or at least partly part of the demos.
Can you make it big again?
Oh yeah, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, so here we go. It's called Simple Forest. I didn't change its name or anything. This is I just copied it from a plugin, I believe. So this is demo content in one of the plugins. I just activate a bunch of the plugins, and it's basically the way that it works is it has some kind of starting data query. This could be an evaluation of landscape surface. Like that might be a one. Landscape. Get landscape data could be one, and then might do something like surface sampler, right? And then you're sampling the surface of a landscape. And the idea is we're trying to sample the surface of something, in this case, because we want everything to sit on the ground. But the ground could be bumpy or whatever, right? And so in this case, it's doing a world ray hit query. And I believe this is constrained by the volume that it sits in. And so within that volume, it'll do this ray hit, line hit. You get into some of this stuff. I didn't get into this because everything up to the point where I intervened was successful. But you can see something here, like there's a surface sampler, there are parameters, points per squared meter is like very low, right? So the frequency of these rock positions are going to be very low. We have point extents to kind of create boundaries between points. So there's like a minimum boundary between points. We have transformations we can apply, like random scales and all that sort of stuff. We have option to self prune. This is if you have points that overlap and you just want to have them automatically prune themselves out. And then you can do things like difference. So here you can see difference is used for the trees and for the let's see, we got source difference. Yeah, so here we have the I believe, hold on a second. I think these are creating exceptions for the grass and tree and grass and rock intersections. So you don't have grass like going under your rock or, clipping through the rock or whatever. And then you have the actual static mesh spawner, which is what actually is spawning your mesh. And you can kind of see the mesh entries here is like a rock, a PCG boulder. And then we have, grass, and there's like 3 different variants. And then we have the trees, and there's only one variant here. Oh, this is the seedling. Where did I sorry, I missed where did I miss my oh yeah, trees is the second layer. Sorry about that. So yeah, grass here. So grass.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, this
Making sure they don't clip with the rocks, so the rocks are kind of getting out of the way of the trees, and the grass is getting away out of the trees too. What were you gonna say?
sorry, your stream cut out for a second there. We lost you.
Oh, sorry.
But you came back, so
I'm back. Okay, cool. Where was I when I cut out?
It wasn't too far. It was maybe like 30 seconds ago, and it cut out for like 5
all
seconds.
I was saying was I realized I just, for some reason, I misread this. I misremembered this. That I realized the trees is the second sort of layer down. And that makes the difference nodes make more sense. Basically, this difference node is making sure that we're removing the points that intersect with these trees. We want to make sure the trees are creating basically exceptions, so we don't have like rocks and trees clipping together, or grass and trees. And then yeah. So then my part comes in. This is my part. This part and this part. What I want to do is I want a single actor of mine that we just looked at to spawn per volume. So each volume was going to have just one actor. But then I run this this blueprint function, which we'll take a look at in just a second, and I run it twice. And there are some. This is called a PCG element, like a let's see, blue. Sorry, if you use execute blueprints, boop, you'll see this blueprint element type, and then you can just create your own if you want. You just create a custom blueprint function. And so this will just run a blueprint function. And if we take a look at that, at my version, my flavor, okay, I implement this thing called execute with context, and this gives me input data. But I also have public parameters that I can set. And this is really important because there are limits to what PCG can feed you dynamically. But in terms of types, like it doesn't have support for like gameplay tags. But you can set that data on the instance of the object running the blueprint function. So in other words, if we go back to our PCG graph, we can see this node is actually a instanced U object running this script. And so I can set data on that. I have access to the public data here, and that includes the color point, right? So I can set the color point on it.
Okay.
The actor is a dynamic input. So I'm creating my target actor is the blueprint that we looked at before that just manages the lifetime of the data. And there are a couple things that I set on this. First of all, I set the template type to my blueprint type. But what I also did was I allowed template actor editing, which means that this gives me direct access to the instance data. Now, this may have been a weird, may have been a misobservation on my part, but I noticed when I had this set, allow template actor editing, that it acted as a kind of clean slate on my instance reference. And we'll get into that lifetime of the reference. But that may have been overboard because I also have this flag clicked, which is called delete actors before generation. So when I generate the graph, this could be force regen here. There's some buttons inside the like display panel on the instance in the world scene where you can regenerate. And also generation happens when you place the instance in the world. And so whenever you do a regen, you can kind of think of this similar, like it's almost like compile in some in concept. It's you could think of it like a compile, like where Blueprints has a compile in MetaSense. It's kind of a compile. Well, you don't notice that anymore. Did we get rid? Yeah, we got rid of it. So, but anyway, the force regen is actually just running the graph again. So it's not exactly the same thing, but it's running the graph again. And so in this case, I just want a clean slate on my actor. If I don't do that, the way that I built the function we call here, it would accumulate data. So that's a little quirkiness. And something else that I've noticed, which I recently had a conversation, like literally this afternoon, with a procedural person about this very issue, is that there are some challenges around managing these actors who spawn in the scene. Right? It's not like automatically attached. There's not like a clear. It's not like parent attached where you delete the volume. The actor can linger. So you'll see when I delete them, I actually end up having to select them both. We'll look at that a little bit later. But anyway, I'm feeding the actor reference, the output of this create target actor node, to the actor input on my function, on my blueprint object, and that is just the input on here. So, in other words, I manually set the color point type, tree for tree, grass for grass, and this is just a gameplay tag that I set up. And then I can set the points offset here. So on tree, I just set 400 positive on the z-axis, right? And so then inside the instance of this, this is what the object looks like. I have this function. This is what gets called, execute with context. There's also an execute without context, but we need the context. The context is the um, is the the point data that we're receiving, and so that's on the input. Sorry, actually, it's just on the input. Uh, the Right. So I first check to make sure my actor is valid. If my actor is not valid, this is pointless. Actually, I mean there might be points, but it's pointless. And then I get the thing that I want to set on my actor, a reference to it. And at the end of my thing, I'll actually pass this data that I've created into the reference of that actor's array, because I know that I could call this function many times on many different instances referencing the same actor. So I'm basically just that's why there's a sort of danger of accumulating data if I don't delete the actor whenever I regenerate. And that's something to think about in terms of when do you decide to feed the data in, and how do you manage like multiple feeds? I could have done multiple actors and not have to deal with this issue, but I just wanted the one actor, and so this is the way I did it. And so yeah, so then I get the point data, and the data class here is PCG point data, and the pin label is this pin label, which I have no idea how to change the name of, but there is a way somehow to change the name of that. And until then, I just said the point pin label was in. So
Work with what
If
you got.
if you click the node, you'll be able to change the inputs, and you can change the types of inputs as well.
Say
On
again?
the if you go to the PCG graph,
Mhm.
and then in the node, so if you click on that, there should be. So you don't have them. Oh,
Okay.
never mind.
All right. I've seen this with a different name, so I'm sure there's some way to do it.
Yeah, so if you click on like any input, like if you go all the way left to the start of this, and then you have like the landscapes and stuff, you can change those inputs. It's every node has like the type that you can change, but so the input and output just above that, the red boxes.
Oh, these. Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, see how they have like pins for the inputs,
Yeah.
and then each of
Red
those
dots.
is the names there. But
Oh,
I can't
that's
remember
probably the name
exactly
then, huh?
where those are. Yeah.
That's probably
Well,
it.
that's the name for the specific PCG input, because you can drive like layered PCG
Oh, like
graphs.
yeah. Okay.
So you can
PCGs
do
for the
like
PCGs.
loops. Yeah, you can do. It's very similar to like Metasound patches, I suppose. You can do things
Yeah. A
like
little
a
messy.
PCG graph that runs PCG graphs inside it.
Right, and feeds dynamic data into it.
Yeah. So that would
Well,
probably be the way to approach some of this, so that you could set those dynamically.
yeah. Yeah. So anyway, this is yeah. So I get the data. I get the pin, the point data. Point data is wrapped in these object references, and then I start my I feed manually put the manually input data into the struct that I'm about to set on my actor, and then it's just a matter of grabbing each of these arrays and then getting all of the points in each one of these object references and zipping through them, and then grabbing the transform and the location, which is the vector I want, and then adding that to the offset, so it feeds in the correct offset information, and then we're done, and we just add it in, and then we go, we're done. Easy peasy. Yeah. Did I miss anything? No, I think that's it. So actually, it wasn't that difficult. It's just not the most optimized way of doing it, but it's as a method, it's serviceable, and the results functional. The results work out. Yeah.
Is there? I'm not clear on the why we need the actor and couldn't just add the color points in that function instead. Like where you have the spawn actor bit where you
No. That
configure
that
it just
I
then.
don't. I could be mistaken, but I don't think that function runs in runtime.
So it doesn't run at runtime, but you'd be
Yes,
adding. Oh right,
but Soundscape subsystem is a runtime system, so it
gotcha.
needs so the lifetime of the data needs to be managed during runtime, and so you need some kind of object to manage it. It could be a component, it could be an actor, but it
Mm,
has to have a location. It has to be able to ideally load in and out with world partition, right? So an actor becomes a sort of prime choice because of that, but it could be a component with that's attached to the volume. Um, I just I think it's just a matter of I stumbled on the create target actor node and that worked, and I was like, all right, we're moving forward. So
yeah,
yeah,
because I think it does. I mean, yeah, I guess it depends on the runtime side of it, but other ways you could look at it of. I suppose you have some sort of data storage, right? Yeah, makes sense.
yeah. So you basically the issue is that you need to during editor time generate data that's serialized into one file per actor, whatever that however that manifests, and so that means it all has to be like object oriented, and then the data has to be accessible during runtime. So I could do something where it's like all of these are assets and there's like asset references, but who needs more assets? Like we've got enough assets,
Mm.
especially since it's spatial data. It feels like it should just be packed in with other spatial stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Guess
cool.
the I wonder the instance like rocks and trees could also have a tag that is them so that you wouldn't do that part manually. You would have like whatever the tag of the asset is. I mean, you'd have to manually tag the assets, but if you wanted rocks and trees of various rocks and tree sizes, you could pass that in as well.
Do you mean like different kind of information?
Yeah, so just like instead of where you set your color points manually, where you're setting a tag, you would read that tag from the static mesh itself,
Right,
or yeah.
right. Except that the static mesh doesn't have that information, right?
I mean, they can have tags, I think,
Not gameplay
but
tags.
huh, I
And I'm
wonder
not
how I
sure
did it.
how the poll would work because it's on, that is also information that is placed in the details part of the, like, I don't know. So there would have to, I think there's like you'd have to go through like their attribute system, maybe.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, that, uh, there could be alternative ways. I mean, this is, it doesn't have to be, okay, let me put it this way. So first of all, as I mentioned before, someone's already told me that they don't have support in the graph for gameplay tag types. That's sort of irrelevant. Um, we could have, it doesn't have the gameplay tags. It could be like an F name or something else. But you I could imagine a situation where you have the like maybe a lookup where it's like, oh, these meshes are registered as this, or the name of these meshes includes this term, so we automatically treat it as this class or something like that.
Yeah, that's what that is. I remember. So I did this for the Megalites demo, a version of this for the Megalites demo, and this was a static lookup of this type of mesh did this type of thing, and then projected it all to color point data. So that's what that is. That makes sense. I think one of the cool things that you've got going on here is that you could also choose which trees and which
Yeah.
points have this
Oh,
information, right? It's like the ones around the
yes.
edges is more
Yes.
like sparse or things like that as well.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. So I'm actually just taking here. Let me zoom back in here. I forgot to mention that. I'm taking the here's like the trees, right? I'm taking the spawner data. So this is what the spawner data is receiving. This all these points, and I'm taking that, and then I apply a density filter where I'm like, cut it by like 50%, because I don't need every tree. I just need maybe every other tree or something like that. I don't need that data to be so dense, and that's a memory optimization to a certain degree. But it is one of those things where it's like maybe a bird could at every tree. So that's sort of a thing you have to sort of ask yourself, and that can be a balance between um, the frequency of successful spawns, right, against the sort of environmental context. But yeah, and then like the grass, I'm actually dividing it by like 1,000 or 100, because I just don't need as much like the way that it does grass, because also there's like a certain amount of procedurality to the way that this particular visualization is designed, and so I don't need the way that it treats the number of grass that it deals with is like way higher. And I just don't need those kind of values. But yes, to your point, as we talked about the difference, and this is also, by the way, an important part of the even just the way that I've done this is that the it's possible that the rocks exclude that metadata. I've actually tightened. This is like the worst part of Soundscape. I hate this part. This is like one of the things that I really, really, really want to redo. But if you go to the project settings, you can see I have this LOD system here, and this is just the idea behind this is that your spatial hash resolution is going to be finer when it's closer to you, so you're going to be dealing with smaller sounds that spawn with lower amounts of lower frequency or spatial frequency of um, of that metadata. Whereas when spawning sounds distant from you, they're probably larger sounds that represent a larger amount of metadata. And so this allows you to manage uh, the resolution of the and also the spatial distance of large to small sounds, the success of those. So in other words, a small sound could spawn very far away, but it's less likely large sound would spawn next to you. And so, like for example, I have this cricket sound. Go up here. It's not here. Sorry. Where's my sound? Oh yeah, here we go. This mass, this like cricket sound. This this I actually recorded in Monrovia near LA. And this sound is representative of a large number of crickets and some other sort of foresty sounds. And so, if we look down at the metadata, it requires 4 grass instead of 1 grass, and so it just won't spawn very close to the player. Is the idea there, and but it will spawn. as a 3D sound. And you can see I have here also constraining how far away it'll play. And if we go to the attenuation, this is actually something I said I was going to bring up, is I have this very long logarithmic attenuation. All my other attenuation sounds are natural, so it's a much sharper concave curve. This logarithmic curve is a little bit gentler. And what that means is sounds with that, if you compare sounds, say, midway between natural and logarithmic and, say, linear, you're going to hear the sounds, logarithmic is going to pop over natural in the mix. Linear is going to pop over logarithmic in the mix. So it's an easy way to create a mix as part of the attenuation. And the significance of the sound. And I often use my ambient sounds, I often use natural curves because I want that very gentle perception of it at a distance. I want it to be sitting lower in the mix as you get closer to it compared to other things that might be more important. And so, but what I do is I have this non-spatialized radius that starts wide and goes very long. And what that achieves is if the sound is, say, 90 degrees to your left, without this, you would not hear it in the right channel. With this, you hear it in the both channels. But it's going to feel like it's leaning somewhat because you have this is sometimes called bleed. And so it's going to effectively create a minimum amount of attenuation on the sound. And so you get this, the speaker that's more direct to the sound might be, depending on where you are in the curve, a little bit louder than the speakers facing away from the source. And so you get this lean that softens the spatialization effect of the sound. And so I use this a lot in the city sample. If you look at my medium scale traffic sounds, you'll see I've used this effect a lot. And the idea is there is a kind of just surround, like it just feels like it's more around you, regardless of where you are in its position, but you still get a sense that it's coming from a location because the sound weights in that direction. And so yeah, if we jump in here, we can hear that those crickets provide a kind of bed, but the bed is spatialized.
Yeah, it does lean really nicely.
Yeah. And so when you're in it, because I have a couple of them, maybe 3 or something like max, they kind of surround you. And then what's fun is that as you move through, like if I make this, it might be more obvious if I make this larger, but as you move through the space, you go boop like that, and then go like that. As you move through our little park here, sometimes you get closer to one of those crickets and you feel like you pass by like maybe a clump of them. It sort of has that feeling. Might be hard to catch that because it's all procedural here. But yeah, so there was one slightly to the right than the rest of them, and yeah. Oh yeah, and then I have wind only happening in the trees as well. Got a lot of big dust here. That's something that you could also tie to like a wind system, but I didn't have that set up. But yeah.
One thing I think would be cool to show, just going back to that density thing, is flicking the debug on for your
good idea.
density.
Yeah, let's check it out.
One of the really cool things that I feel like is it's a little bit hard to show, but the second you get this idea, you can keep going and going and going with it. It's like if you picture a cliff and walking up to the edge of a cliff. Maybe you want the sounds of like dust being blown off the cliff, and you could use PCG to work out the contour of the cliff, giving you whether or not you should play wind sounds at that cliff and that kind of thing. So there really is, when you start working with the debug, you find, oh, there's this information and that information, and visually it might be very different to the information we care about.
Yeah, let me see if do we have like a better, we just need like a material that has like red or something. Yeah, here we go. This pink, this will do it. So, oh, do I have to? No, there it goes. Okay. So yeah, so here's the trees after my filter. So I guess we'll do this. The trees after my filter. So you can see it's a lot of them, but it's not every single one. You know, it's 50%, but it's like a coin flip, so it's different. You know, it's not going to be exactly 50%. And then if we do the grass, where am I? The grass is down here. Let's also switch that to pink. And then we go like that. This might take a second to load up. Right? No? Maybe I did I not do that? I'm definitely getting data, and you know I can tell because when I click on my actor, I can see it. There's the grass. I have 555 array elements. That's how many points of data I've captured for the grass. So maybe the pink boxes
probably
are really
because they're
small or something, or underneath.
Yeah, because they're
Oh wait, hold on. I think I saw them.
planes. So you can make them larger in the debug.
There.
You can just override the debug.
There, I found one. That's it. So yeah, I just gotta. You said, hold on a second. Let's go back to the debug here.
Yeah, so if you click the little debug right at the top, the other debug.
Oh, this one.
Oh no, maybe you need to. Usually, what I do here is actually do transform points, and then you can debug the transformed points, and you can make them larger.
Let's do. Yeah, okay.
Is it the scale method?
Yeah, it's just literally scaling them up, and then you can
turn this debug off. D is the shortcut for debug, and then we'll just do that's locked. So we could just do 5, maybe 5 times bigger.
Yeah.
And then let's go with the pink. There you go. Yeah, that's good enough. So you can see, yeah, much sparser. And that's okay. You know, I don't want it to be, in this case, I didn't want it to be every single one. Because I find it's like, to me, it's about coverage. So it's like if I feel like I have sufficient coverage to create the experience, then it becomes a balance between coverage, or rather, it becomes a balance between successful spawns, right? Because if these are like 3 meters apart, maybe there's a hole in here where it wouldn't spawn. So a balance between successful spawns and how much data I'm caching for my system, right? So, and I think if we wanted to do a little experiment, we could take this density and we could increase it by a significant amount. Let's say 10 in each direction. So we'll go like that. And we save it and do a force regen. So now it's much more frequent. And then as a consequence, my bugs will be more successful, right? For better or worse, you know, and that's...
Well, the cool thing about it is that you could choose to, say, scale up the points for the rocks so that as you're getting up to the rocks, you know, are pushing out other sounds and you get a more dramatic change between each one, even though the rocks they're not as many rocks. You know, you can scale up the points and pass those in and use those as emitters or something.
Yeah, so for I think I can do... I think I can do this. So for this, I could probably, let's say I double it, 220,
So that would
100.
double the amount of rocks,
20.
though.
No, this is the point extents.
Oh,
So this
gotcha.
is the size. I believe this is the presumed space each point takes.
That's right.
And
Yep.
I think, I mean, we'll see. We'll find out. I'm gonna force a regen, and let's see if there's just more. Yeah, so there you got more space around those rocks, right? Now it doesn't. Now here's the thing: is this is just data. It's not the rock that makes this. It's the function I called, and so I could call a separate function for my data, right? So in other words, let's experiment with that. So here we'll take this. Let's put this back the way it was. 50, 60. And then what I could do, this is sort of cheating, and just copy this. Yeah. And then make sure I hook it up the same way. And here. And instead of spawning meshes, right, we could just add this to, hold on. Okay, this is gonna get a little bit funky. Let's do this. We'll go like this. We're probably getting a little more complicated than we need to. I'm just gonna add this this difference function here. I'm gonna pass my data through this. So this is after the spawn. Come on. Come on, mouse. There we go. Pass my data through. And then this be like this, and then this could be double. Let's do it. Let's do it kind of big. We'll do 300 by 150 by 240, something like that. Okay, and then we force a regen. Boop. And so now we should see, not that the grass itself is making space around. Oh, fuck it. Damn you. I didn't do it right. Oh, hold on a second. What did I do? This. This is fine. We don't care about that. This is adding difference. This. And it's possible. Let's make this kind of obscene. We'll go like this. Oh, you know what? No, hold on a second. I just realized something. Here, let's do this. Let's go here. And then let's scale it up. I think because they were different, because I realized I was grabbing different parts of the thing.
Yeah, one of the things that's worth mentioning when playing with PCG is like that regenerating the grid and this iteration step can be really like cumbersome. So trying to keep sometimes the automated regeneration and stuff can really crash Unreal and stuff if you accidentally put a 1 where a 0 is supposed to be and stuff.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's definitely possible. It's just I probably am not. The problem is making sure that that I'm working with the same data as the actual spawning points for the rocks. So it could be something where I'm actually need to do something like this. Actually, like this. Oh, damn it! Did the thing? There we go.
Yeah, because you don't. If you accidentally sample them again, you'll be resampling new positions potentially.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe all I need to do is this. There we go. Maybe all I need to do is this. Maybe this is excessive. By the way, PCG is fun. If you look at this and you go, man, that's my jam. then PCG can be a lot of fun. I feel like I've created the exclusion space, but I've got a like weird offset or something like that. Let's see what's going on here.
Did you regen?
Yeah, I did, but you can also nudge the volume if you just want one instance to do it.
If people are into PCG, a really good YouTube channel for it is, I think, called Procedural Minds. I'm gonna say
that sounds like a cool YouTube channel.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I mean, if I've got it right, I'll look it up and I'll post it in the chat. But one of the things that when we look at PCG, it's not actually necessarily all natural things. You can make buildings and modular structures and dungeons and things like that out of it as well. So there's more versatility than just the infinite forest.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point to mention. Anyway, yeah. So this is. I think we get the gist here. But yes. Well, let me do this. Let me at least play around with. Do this again. It's like doubling in the thing. Else that. Go back to the way that I had it, and we can go kind of. Let's go high on the filtration here. Oh yeah, now it's generating a lot of data. I should have realized that. 10 times more data than it was before.
This is the true PCG experience.
This is exactly.
The amount of times where I'm like, oh yeah, this would be great. Maybe I'll just bump it up by like 0.2, and then it's like, oh, you just generated 1 million samples. It took like 45 minutes, and then it crashed Unreal, and you're like, oh yeah, that happens. And there's not. It's a little bit. It reminds me of like the, accidentally plugging the wrong thing into something in MetaSounds and getting that crazy volume blast or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's just part of PCG is this, unfortunately.
It's all part of the fun.
Yep. But it is really powerful when you really think about how sound works in an environment. So something like if you want a person that yodels on a mountain, you wait for them to be in a clearing, and then that's you check for points around that space, and then that's a designated yodel location. Those are all very possible if you think about the way density works. And you can also get material information out of landscapes. So you could say like, look for a little puddle, and then in that puddle you could have like mosquito sounds.
Yeah. And here's the moment of truth.
Hey, look at all of our dots.
Up. We're working.
Making dots.
Making little cubes.
Plus, it's a beautiful forest.
Oh, there they are. Oh, I guess we're working on it still. Yeah, it is. Actually, I think it's pretty clever. A little stylized forest.
It's a lot better than needing to download like 70 gig of megascans to take that forest. But
yep. I always, what's funny about the megascan stuff is I always feel like the results will be better than the way that they turn out for me personally, because then I'm like, oh, I've got this really nice wood texture, but I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah. I feel like the problem is I look at the screenshots and I'm just like, damn, that looks so good. And then I place like one tree next to a barn and I'm just like, oh, how come mine doesn't look like that? And then I forget that there's like decades of tech experience and beautiful runtime virtual textures and really, really nice lighting and really, really clever tech art stuff that I just don't think about.
Tech art is no joke. It is
beautiful. It's so
a real job. It's a real job. And it's the people. I have great admiration for all the tech artists that I get to work with. Whenever I get to work with them, they're awesome. So here I've got like maximum density for the color point data. So there's probably not going to be a failed spawn for the insects. And we're probably just seeing all of like the like actual update rate of the spawning for the insects. And I can see the crickets are virtualizing, so that might be like an optimization point where I might fix that up. So I don't need them to be virtualizing. It's probably just because they're a loop or something like that. But yeah, so anyway, I feel like this was surprisingly quick, in terms of what I was getting for the work, and no, I was very pleased with it. And I know it's just like a simple forest, but I don't know, it just felt like
The method doesn't change. Like I don't think that there doesn't really get yeah, the method's the same whether they do rocks and trees and grass or they do 30 other different types of things. At the end of the day, it's just point information. And really, the only reason it turns into geometry is because of that one node that says static mesh spawner. Like
yeah,
if you disconnect, maybe that's an interesting one. If you disconnect the static mesh spawners and just show the point data, it will still look like a forest. It'll just be a forest of cubes,
yeah, yep, as nature intended.
as nature intended.
William had a good question about when you say look for, are you talking about ray tracing or what other techniques?
Yeah, so our William, can you clarify what you mean, what we mean by look for? Because I don't remember
I think
when we might have said that.
maybe like looking for the edge of a cliff or, looking for some actors.
Yeah, so part of that, in PCG, you have these sampler functions. Sorry, it's processing. In currently processing procedural graph, you have these sampler functions. There we go. Yeah, like this surface sampler thing. Can I zoom in? Oh yeah, cool. So you have stuff like this, and I actually don't know what method it's using. It might be ray trace, but I don't know because graphics people going to graphic. But somehow it's producing points at this frequency and at with these sort of bounds around them.
So, I think again, kind of bringing it back to the beginning when we talk about this is outputting information and data more so than it is
Yeah.
like actually generating actors
Well,
in a world.
I mean, it's spawning. It's
Yeah.
spawning instant static
But
meshes or
there's information underneath that you can use to
yes,
tell, okay, there's a puddle here, there's a cliff there, there's a
that's
tree
right.
and a rock. Yeah.
Yeah, everything up to that point was points.
So it's probably not ray tracing then, right? If you're if it's looking at the underlying generated information.
Yeah, because we're able to provide it. Well, so this might be ray tracing because this is called World Ray Hit Query,
Sure.
and it has like a shape type and let's see if we got some. I don't know if we got anything else that we could sort of
And I
get
could
impact
see
point, get reflection, get normal. So this one's using a ray trace, right?
I could see where that'd be useful for like where's the edge of this rock or
Yeah,
something.
exactly. And the method, the other methods might be different. Let's take a look. Because we also looked at the landscape data, right? So get landscape data is another point at which you might use information. And we can see we get height only, get layer weights, right? These are all landscape oriented information. And so we could sample its surface and might use a different method. This one seems appropriate for like a arbitrary volume in space, right? For
And
grabbing the surface.
I imagine you could theoretically create your own types of queries, like make different nodes that give you different information.
I imagine.
Probably.
So I have looked at the code for PCG nodes, and I haven't wrapped my head around how they work yet, because it's a little bit different from what I'm accustomed to. But you can absolutely, I mean, if you've got the will, there is a way. The source is out there.
Yeah.
So one of the primary ways that PCG wants to work is you can pass in. You're either going to pass in objects, pass in paths, or pass in points itself. Oh, now I'm dropping out. Awkward. Yeah, so you can either pass in splines, objects, points, landscapes, whatever it might be, and then stack those on top. So you can do queries, or you can tag actors and then
Yeah.
read those tags in. So you could, have a volume, put all your stuff in a volume, like, because it sort of goes to mention that something else, that there's a misconception with PCG that, like, when you use PCG, it means that everything in the whole world is PCG. And that's not actually the case. You could do something like put, let's say we have a location where we want the player to be able to walk up to this shop and buy a thing from the shop. But leading up to that shop, we want to have just some forest, and we don't really care what that forest is, or not even a forest. Let's just say it's like a pond and a beautiful mountainside and a path. And then what we do is we draw a spline for the path leading up to the house. We put the house in a spot, and then we just leave the rest of it blank, and we put a big PCG volume around it. And then when the player walks up to it, we generate the forest around, or the path or pond or whatever. We generate all those things. We don't generate them near the spline, and then we'll have those locations. And we might need things like, we might need to shoot rays from above to make sure that if there's some overhanging tree, we don't spawn,
Sure.
things underneath that, or we keep the path really clear and all that kind of element. So you don't have to use PCG as an all-encompassing source. You may just use PCG as one part of it, and then say,
Yeah.
give some tags around a spot and say, oh, if there's a tag that's like dilapidated mansion or something, we might say, okay, instead of live trees and live bushes, we're going to spawn some dead trees and dead bushes
Yeah.
because it's dilapidated now, and that's what happened in that environment.
Put some trash on the side of the road, or
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. What I feel like is the really nice balance is kind of what you described, David, is that sort of golden path where it's like, okay, because I think there's a lot of value in curating an experience, and I really like that process anyway. And so, but what's nice is that if you can create this sort of balance wherein your artists or your designers can focus on elevating the experience in these golden path areas without making those a constrained part of like the user's experience, and you can fill in the gaps with procedural content that makes sense, is contextually appropriate for whatever the experience is supposed to be. And so it becomes kind of like a time saver, and the more that you can support the procedural design across your domains, the easier it's going to be to deal with these parts of the experience. And one of the things that I think is actually really cool, both about PCG and about MetaSounds, because MetaSounds is also designed around procedural design. You'll see that both of them support deterministic. I'm on a landscape here. I overshot my mouse click. Both of them support procedural randomization. So you'll see on your PCG component that there is a seed value. And the seed value is the deterministic outcome of its random selections. And so you can actually, another way to sort of regen is to nudge this seed value, generate a new outcome for the graph, and but also the seed allows you to maintain consistency. So, for example, any random values elected by this system will maintain their consistency between um, loads, or whatever you want to call it, instances of this map, uh, because of this seed value. And so, when I shut the editor down and I open it back up, that tree is still going to be in the same spot because even though the graph regenerates, I'm going to see that seed is going to ensure the outcome of that random selection. Metasounds also does this. All the official Metasound nodes that have some kind of randomization in them support a seed input. And so potentially, this is actually one of the oversights of Soundscape, is that I didn't support seed and deterministic randomization, which is one of those other things on my list that I would like to add if I ever get a chance to revisit Soundscape. And yeah, that could potentially be one of the things I could potentially feed that seed. Maybe there's probably some way to get the seed. Actually, let's see. There should be. Let's see. Seed. Seed from value. There you go. This is creating a new one. Sorry. Let's see. Seed. Generate seed. I don't know. Maybe there's maybe the source hash string constant reset seed per input. There's probably some method to get the seed that has been given by the component. I imagine there's got to be some way to do that. And then you could potentially pass that into some procedural metasound so that they are coherent with each other every time. The expectation, what someone hears in this area and this metasound outcome is going to be the same.
Seed's
Cool.
tricky like that too, because it's super useful. Like using seed, if you when you do it really really well and it becomes really predictable, it can be even a player feature at times. Like I've seen roguelites where they let you play the same seed repeatedly and things like that, so that you can try and run them. And it does feel like sometimes with some systems, if you want to repeatedly kind of, oh, let's just keep running it until we work out something nice and then store that later on and say, oh, this is good, keep that. That could be really useful as well.
Yeah. I have fantasies around that. Like I've always thought about it'd be fun to do like procedural theme generation for users, where it's like each user gets its own little melodic theme. And what's cool is that could be something that other people hear because the seed is just a piece of data.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. One of the ideas that I had that we never got around to on an experience I was working on, I thought would have been really neat, is we were going to have some kind of procedural music generation that was environmentally influenced. Things that the player set up in that area would be influencing the melodic generation or the musical generation. But I also thought it'd be cool to do like a spatial hash, basically use a hashing function to take the listener location and then convert it to an integer. The seed is usually just an integer, and then convert it to an integer and feed that in as a seed for the music. So in other words, whenever you were in the same spot, you would hear the same music. You move to a different area, you'd hear different music, even if the system was the same. Anyway, there's a lot of fun there. Let's play around with that stuff. And that stuff is way cooler than generative AI, and that's the only time you'll ever hear me talk about generative AI on this live stream, because we don't talk about generative AI on this live stream.
I have a super duper quick a different PCG graph about using a spline if we're interested in that, which is basically the same thing. Just thought people might be interested. Let's see. So I have this. It doesn't make pretty sounds, but I have this location here where it's just a bunch of hospital beds and tables, and they have these little clipboards that don't quite sit perfectly on them, but could. And whenever I adjust my spline, if I move it around, I'll get different versions of it, and they'll kind of stay in this and try and fill the space somewhat. So I can used this for filling a room with correct locations, and the graph itself is pretty simple. We have a spline that we pass in so that we could use the spline information
Right.
as a part of that. We sample that spline, and then I'm transforming the points just again to move them around a little bit so I don't get exactly that same spot,
A little shuffle, a little
adding a
rotation.
little bit of noise, which if I sort of put this on the side, you'll see what each of these spots does. So when I look at the initial spline, gets the points within the spline, which is these boxes.
Even Steven looking. Yeah.
And then we think of shuffling those boxes around
Yep.
a little bit just to get a little bit of variation. And we apply some noise to the attributes, which is a whole other part of PCG. But
Yeah. We
you
didn't get really
can,
into attributes. Yeah.
yeah, they're really really useful in some places. A lot of this project is me just playing with this architecture thing that I'm working on instead. But the attributes are a really cool part of what you could do is just sort of injecting information into our elements. So if you look at the attributes, actually probably won't be in here, might be further down, but you can look at giving them attributes, so how far away they are from each other, or how high up they are, or how many you've spawned, or something like that.
Right.
And then we kind of split them because I want to spawn two different types of tables. So I want to have like little carts and big carts and have them take up some amount of space. So I'm
Right.
trying to make sure that they aren't too close to each other, but I could have them. I mean, in the end of it, I'm going for a very messy sort of post-apocalyptic hospital thing. So I actually don't want them to like line up, but I may want them in some other system to sort of snap to each other and be at right angles or something like that.
Right. Right. Right.
And then, yeah, we just make sure that there aren't overlapping points because they do tend to make points next to each other. And the same strategy you had before of like making sure that we don't overlap, because if I don't have the difference node, they could spawn inside each
Right.
other and things like that. And then we have these, so they have different locations. And then the world ray trace thing, I could use that here to make sure that these clipboards kind of spawn on, properly
Right.
on
Right.
each of the meshes, or all I did here was just transform them up because I can work out how tall this specific mesh is and give them a spot there, and from there just spawn the books on
Yeah.
top, or the books on top. But sort of just shows you a different way to approach spawning these, where I might have a spline, and the spline could actually be a path of no go. So I could make sure that I don't spawn inside all this spline, and that way I could, always have it around the outside or something
Right.
like that
Right. Little
as
exclusion
well.
zone.
Yeah.
It's cool. I like the boxes. Kind of give you a good idea of what it's doing, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the debug is essential. Oh, I lost your thing. Yeah. I don't know why it does that. Yeah.
Yeah, the debug it's funny with PCG. It's very funny where computers will only do exactly what you ask them to, and PCG is very very clear about that fact. Where PCG says like, well, you said to do XYZ, and
Yeah.
sometimes you may think that it's going to do a grid thing, or it's going to do something in a way that you believe it would, and then you really have to think. It's very rules oriented. So if I want those tables to line up, I need to think of an algorithm or a structure or a way to make them line up. They will not line up by accident, and it just won't happen.
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed with when introducing noise, because I have another project where I'm doing building Magic Forest, and is the like trees is a great example of something that typically grows vertically. And you're like planting a tree, and then it's like then I actually have to go in and sanitize the like rotational data after I've shuffled things and messed things around, because I and then maybe even resample the floors because maybe I've offset, and now I'm hanging off the side of a hill or something like that because the original point data was like wrapping around the surface of a landscape, but then, introducing the noise there puts an offset. Yeah, but I find it a very enjoyable design environment. You know what I mean? I feel like it's responsive. Let me put it that way. Like I make a change and something happens, and whether I like the result or not, it does happen. It's only when we're talking about thousands of things at once that sort of like it's like, oh, now I got to take a break, walk away from the computer for a couple seconds while it's doing its thing. But I usually don't blame PCG for that or anything else. I usually blame my computer for that. If only it were a better computer.
The best thing to do is, I feel like, just try and keep static mesh out of it for as long as possible, and generally you're not going to have those really long hangs. You have those long hangs when it's like, okay, let me
It's a really good
delete
point. Yeah.
900,000 rocks and then respawn 900,000 rocks. It's like, well,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you're trying to spawn 900,000 or 1.8 million rocks. Like that's what's going to happen there. But
Yeah.
I agree. I find it a really, really fun environment. I've been doing a lot of like acoustic experiments in it, trying to work out like, oh, well, where
Yes.
should
Yeah.
certain
Sure.
sounds play based on like, can I find the archways? And then in archways, based on like, does this point have geometry above and below it, but not next to it? And then
Right.
that sort of tells me like where a hole is, and then I can work out how big the hole is and have like wind kind of, making sound through an archway or something. And I can
Yeah.
do all that at editor time, and then just place an emitter that does the howling sound, and it's
Right.
like nobody knows that I haven't done it at runtime. And I think I think that's incredibly powerful. It's a very abstract way of thinking. Like, oh, what's this problem? The problem here is that there's a cavity, and so I need a cavity detection thing,
Right.
and that's tricky.
Yeah. 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 I feel like that's it comes back to many conversations we've had about procedural design on the chat where it's like the creative process itself is coming up with rules and constraints that fit the aesthetic, that fit the outcomes that you're looking for. And whether you create them yourself or you impose those rules upon a system that generates that data is still part of the creative process. And that's why I think so when we did the Matrix Awakens, they had a thing called the rules processor, which ended up just being for that project. But it was part of. I mean, originally it was designed in part to process the Houdini data because that stuff was generated in Houdini. But I think that those sorts of I felt like rule processor was going to be like the hottest thing that we were come out with at the time. I was like, this is cool, but I feel like PCG is basically the like the real successor of that system and all the stuff that the world team and the procedural team did during that time. And so it's really I think it's really exciting. It's something you don't want to sleep on. You at home, check out the PCG stuff. Actually, David, I'll grab your links. Can you put those in the stream links maybe, and then I'll grab those or something. No, do it in the general. I don't know what to do. Do it. No, I don't know what to put it.
I'll
Put it
send it to
somewhere.
you. Yeah, I'll send them to you afterwards. I put some
Somewhere.
in the chat. I mean, you could throw a rock and hit a YouTuber with a PCG tutorial at the moment, and I don't I don't encourage you to do that. But
It's very
the
nice. It's very generous.
there are there are tons of different versions of this. It goes a lot further than just forests, and I really, really think that there's a latent space that's growing of audio being able to use this information, and it's just going to take some upskilling from all of us to really think about audio in a new way, as opposed to placing our assets and hoping for the best. And I think that there's some really beautiful ideas here of being able to, hear the sounds of. I mean, there's a lot of natural things that we need to cover. There's a lot of unnatural things we need to cover. But if you look at the Matrix demo or City Sample, and you think about, like, I know you've spoken about things like the overpass, the sound of the overpass, and things like that. These are there are systemic solutions or systemic approaches to some of these problems that I think are really interesting to think about as tech audio people in general. I'll resend some of those links, and we'll make sure that those are in the description as well. But I don't have on hand audio specific PCG things. I don't think I've seen or found one. At some point, I should get around to making more videos about PCG. But I think that there is so much evolving, and it's evolving so quickly that because there's such value in being able to generate this amount of stuff, that it's a little bit hard to keep your finger on the pulse. So you will find things like separate major versions of Unreal will break a lot of PCG projects at the moment, just because by virtue of the change that's occurring in them. But yeah, just getting started with Electric Dreams is a really, really good environment for it, because it shows you how stuff can kind of stack on top, and there's cool spline stuff as well. But I would say even just getting PCG and doing some of your own, like take a fab environment and be like, what information can I get from it? Could I do a thing where this location has this information or something like that?
Yeah. Well, and there's sample content now, as we just looked at. That little forest was sample content from the PCG plugins. So yeah, just go for it. And the only thing stopping us from having more PCG audio related YouTube videos is you at home, who, or wherever you are. I don't know where you're watching this. It's your fault. It's so you gotta make some. Go make some. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
the other part of it, I would say, look up, because PCG is a procedural mindset, but there's not necessarily a lot of games out with like very in depth. You know what I'm saying. PCG stuff. There's a really great, I think it's a GDC talk. I don't think it's on the Vault, by the Ubisoft team. I think the Far Cry series has a lot of really good procedural mountain things. It's not PCG, but it is something that will show you ways to approach things like fence alignment and path things and cliff faces in a biome related way that is very closely related to the sort of thinking that goes on in PCG.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth noting that PCG didn't invent procedural generation, right? And you have been able to do procedural content design in Unreal for a very, very, very long time. It's basically anything if you could put it together with a script, you could probably create a procedural design. So, and I remember really early on, one of like the sort of fun examples for UE4 was like, here we've got a fence. And you can just stretch it as long as you want, and the fence just builds out. And you can do then they could do like spline fences and stuff like that. And that's a great example, like a very simple but straightforward example of a procedural design. And that was all done with construction scripts. I think the idea behind PCG is to first class the construction script like process, and to do it a way that handles things at scale, because that's another thing that's sort of shifting in terms of games now from maybe 15 years ago is we are definitely seeing a lot more larger scale stages for our like game experiences, where we are going to have to it's like you can't just scale up your team and like hire 100 more people necessarily, and you don't necessarily need to either, because if it's just going to be more curated content, you have to sort of ask yourself what's the value of that versus the kind of experience you're creating and what the expectations are for the project.
And a final sort of point on this as well is that if you're interested in something that isn't Unreal necessarily, we've mentioned Houdini a few times, and there's some pretty good evaluation licenses, I think, for 3 months or something like that for Houdini, and especially around the Global Game Jam time, which is around the January
sure.
something mark as well. Houdini is a different program that's entirely separate to Unreal, but is very built around procedural aspects in both film and television and games. And there's a combinations of Houdini that works with Unity and works with Unreal as well. So if you're not using Unreal but you're interested in procedural mindsets, a lot of the city sample content that you would think would have been made with PCG was actually made in Houdini because of the way that sort of evolved at the time. So there's ways to adapt a pipeline that isn't necessarily just with entirely Unreal, and PCG just makes that a little bit more approachable than having to sort of have the intermediary between the two different pipelines working together. But the mindset is the important thing.
Yeah. A great example of the Houdini in action is the Insomniac Spider-Man games. Use Houdini for their city generation, so it's a great use case.
So cool.
All right, any final words, Eric? Final word? Nothing.
Nothing.
Right.
A number?
Nope.
Yeah, that's
Learned
right.
a lot though. That was really fun. Thank you both for showing off some cool PCG.
Yeah. Mine was cooler. It's not.
It was. I'll have to think of whatever you're going to promote next. I'll have to just get a 3D ray tracing version of it.
That's right. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. All of you are fantastic people, unless you're not, and I don't know you. And hope I will see you next time, whenever that may be. Probably next Thursday. And thanks, Eric and David, for hanging out, spending your time on your Thursday and or Friday morning / noontime / lunchtime. I guess it's like lunchtime time for you, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, you're gonna get some food after this.
Yep.
And all right.
See you.
Good night. Bye.
Thanks for having us.